The Iowa State linebackers last season had a hell of a time. The number one story of the entire season was injuries. We saw that really from day one, where we saw Caleb Bacon, who was projected to be the number one guy, the leader of that room, the starting middle linebacker. Um, after coming off of a really impressive 2023 season, where we saw him step it up big time, as a walk-on linebacker, um, as really a very high-end edge rusher, stand-up edge rusher from the linebacker spot. And the thought was that going into 2024, he was going to be the dude. He's going to play the middle linebacker spot, and it was going to, he was going to be the leader of that defense. Well, it started off that way, and then in about the second drive of the game, he goes down with what ended up being a season-ending injury, which was a broken leg. So right away, basically right from the get-go, the linebackers group loses their leader, not just a really good player, but a vocal leader of the team. Goes down to an injury early, and this is also going into this as well, is coming into the season. Another starting linebacker, Will McLaughlin, was still coming back from a back injury last season. So they're already banged up going into the season. They're down a starter going into the season. And then you lose your number one guy, Caleb Bacon, in the first quarter of the first game. So basically, right away, they're dealing with lots and lots of adversity. And we'll tell the story kind of as the season goes on, but that the group responded in a big way. And I think the leader of that charge, as far as just responding to all those injuries, was Cooper Ebel, who started his first games as a Cyclone, as a believe as a redshirt sophomore. So very very young guy, an elder statesman by comparison to the rest of the group that would play for the rest of the season, but an otherwise very young guy that had never started a game and had really only played like special teams and stuff like that up to that point. And he was a guy coming out. He's a kind of the classic guy that Iowa State and Iowa like to recruit a lot, where he's playing every position for his 8-man football team, or for single A football team in Iowa. Actually, I think Cooper did play 8-man, but he's playing every position for his team, and turns out to just be just a good athlete that does a lot of things really really well. And Cooper stepped in. He wasn't perfect, as you wouldn't expect a first time starter to be, but he stayed healthy all season, which is more than almost anybody in this position group can say. But he did a really excellent job, um, holding his ground, maintaining his run fits pretty well. He was good on run run stopping. He was okay in pass coverage. I think there's definitely some room for growth in pass coverage, but that's certainly not to say he was a liability or anything like that. It just he wasn't an all-star in pass coverage necessarily. But like I said, he stepped in and was asked to take over a leadership role that he was not supposed to be saddled with this season. You were supposed to have Caleb Bacon available, and you were supposed to have Will McLaughlin available. But those two guys go down early. Cooper Ebel does a really nice job. The next guy that stepped in that did a really great job, and unfortunately was one of the guys that did fall to injury eventually, was true freshman linebacker Caleb Brzina. And this is not amazingly, this for a college football coach in Matt Campbell that doesn't typically like to play freshmen. Um, this is now the second time that he's started a freshman middle linebacker against Iowa. In what Mike Rose started the first game against Iowa in 2018, the first game of the season, and which it was the first game of the season that actually counted, because the first game of that season was South Dakota State and that got canceled. But now you have Caleb Brzina starting at middle linebacker against Iowa, and he does an excellent job. He's all over the place. You can tell he's green, but he is all over the place, making tons and tons and tons of tackles, and really playing, I think, beyond his years. He did a really, really outstanding job for a while. And just, the rest of the room, you had tons and tons of guys, kind of rotating in some of that other spots. Cause I want to pull up the roster here for a second. You look at some of these guys, and this is really the story of the room. I think that's important to note, going into next season, is that you've got a lot of guys in this room right now that have taken a lot of snaps for Iowa State. They've started a lot of games, or have just in general taken a lot of snaps. If you look at this list, Zach Lovett has started games. Let me see. So Zach Lovett has started games. Caleb Brzina has started games. Carson Willich, Was expected to start games this year, but was injured, but was another linebacker that was injured. John Klosterman, I don't know if he started any games last year, but he definitely played a lot. Caleb Bacon was, Will McLaughlin event was supposed to be a starter, was out for a good chunk of the beginning of the season. Made his first starts in the last couple games of the year, and actually played really really well. But didn't make an appearance until November basically. Um, Jack Sadowski was in there for a while. Eventually, eventually got injured. He started a bunch um, the last 2 years really he started a bunch as a freshman as a middle linebacker, and then played as much as he could last year until he got hurt again. Bo Goodwin was a guy that came on, especially I want to say is about middle of October is where he started getting real like heavy snaps. But he came on as a true freshman, and played really well, frankly. Um, it's honestly kind of amazing at the kind of play that Iowa State was able to get out of this linebacker group, especially with so many of them being so young. Mason Miller was a guy that I picked out on our recruiting article for the 2023 class, the 2024 class. That Mason Miller was a guy that I had picked out as kind of, I think this guy's going to be really really good someday. He maintained his red shirt. He only played in a few games, and I think that was very intentional on the coaching staff's part. Is they want to keep him around as long as they can and make sure he's ready to go. Um, Ryland Barnes, I think, is kind of he is I shouldn't even say he was unsung because he got his flowers during the season, but this is a guy. I mean, he is not only just a true freshman, he was a true freshman walk on that was eventually asked to start at middle linebacker for a good chunk of the season. Probably at least half of the season. I want to say by the UCF game, I think is when he was starting or playing heavy snaps. Um, Again, young guy. He would have been a redshirt freshman, not a true freshman, but he was a redshirt freshman walk on. Played a lot of really nice snaps. He looked like a walk on that hadn't started at times. But gosh, he held his own. He proved himself to absolutely be worthy of a spot on a Big 12 football team, and honestly, just did a really nice job. I had the pleasure of meeting Ryland's parents down in Dallas before the Big 12 championship game, and they were all-star. It's an all-star Cyclone family. They grew up Iowa State fans. They have a farm. Their farm logo is like Barnes Family Farms or something like that, and it looks like the old 90s tornado Cy logo. So Iowa State family all through and through. That kid bleeds cardinal and gold. And I hope, like I said, that with the changing roster sizes and scholarship limits and things like that, they're right, college football rosters are in such flux right now. It's trying to figure out how they're going to cut down and how they're going to get to their design roster size here. But you know, I think Ryland Barnes deserves to be on a spot. I don't know exactly what his status is necessarily, as far as on the depth chart, but I think he's absolutely earned a spot on the 2 deep, 3 deep, whatever you want to call it. Um, and I really hope that this entire group, frankly, is good to go for next season. A couple guys that didn't really play last year, Alec Cook and Nick Reineke and Danny Inglis, none of them really got much for playing time last year. But I mean, I would say played like 12 linebackers last year, and I think probably 9 of them started. Zach Levitt was another one that I mentioned I mentioned a little bit before, but he played a lot as a junior, especially when he had just transferred from Mizzou, and towards the end of the 2023 season, um, he really took on a role that was, I wouldn't say he was a specialist, but he was definitely his primary role on the team was as a QB spy for when I was playing a mobile quarterback. They would put Zach Levitt on a QB spy, and he did a really, really nice job. But that's another guy last year that went down to injury eventually. So most of this year, you had guys rotating in and out. John Klosterman played a couple of really nice snaps. Played some really nice snaps up for the first half of the season, basically, and then eventually got hurt. Um, this is a group that, because of all the injuries, because of all the snaps that were divvied out throughout all of last season, all of a sudden now becomes, went from, maybe your thinnest position group on the team to arguably maybe the deepest outside of maybe tight end and running back. But the level of depth at this linebacker spot is outrageous. Because of all of those snaps that you got, there wasn't anybody that you watched last year that was like, "Oh, this guy's crap, and this guy just can't play, and he's only playing because there's nobody there." All of these guys proved to be worthy of a playing on a Big 12 defense, and you get all of them back, including Caleb Bacon, including a healthy Caleb Bacon and a healthy Will McLaughlin, and hopefully a healthy Carson Willich, and you get a healthy Zach Levitt back. You have guys that played last year and played a whole bunch of snaps last year, like a Bo Goodwin that was really, really good. And he's gonna be, maybe he's in the 2 deep, but I mean he'll I would think he'll be at least at the end of the rotation. But right now, I mean, he's not. I'd be pretty surprised if he started just because of who's in front of him. Because I mean, I would assume that your three linebackers and your 3-3-5 that you're going to be starting. My projected starters would be Will McLaughlin, Caleb Berzina, Caleb Bacon, maybe as an edge rusher. Um, if they went to like a three linebacker and then just moved like to a kind of a pseudo 3-4 type of thing with Caleb Bacon as an edge rusher. Um, I think you would go with um Cooper Ebel, Caleb Berzina, and Will McLaughlin. And maybe the starting group is Will McLaughlin, Caleb Bacon, and Cooper Ebel. That could also be the three there. I think those four, I think Ebel, Bacon, McLaughlin, and Berzina are kind of your four that you feel like those are got to be just about your locked in starters for this coming season in some form or fashion. They're gonna heavily rotate 6, 7, 8, 9 guys throughout the year because they have the bodies to do that now, especially to keep guys fresh throughout the whole year and be able to put guys in that are fresh on a routine basis, basically. Hopefully, you get a little bit better injury luck this season, and you've got tons and tons of depth at the linebacker spot this year. Like I said, I think you're starting four. Pick any three of these four. If you're picking a three across, any three of McLaughlin, Brazina, Ebel, and Bacon, I think are your four. You're picking three of, and then maybe you put three of them there, and then have Caleb Bacon as an edge rusher or something like that. I mean, that's a really really good um that's a really good linebacker group, and I'm verifying right now, but I believe kind of because of the number of guys coming back in 2025, I don't believe they even took a linebacker. I'm verifying, but if I remember correctly, they did not even take a linebacker. They took a couple edge rushers, but which we talked about. Okay, they did take one, and Will Hawthorne out of Gilbert, who is a 4-star recruit on 247, so he's expected to be. I would assume he'll be here in the summer because he's not currently on this. This is the spring football roster that Iowa State released. Actually, I want to say it was like today or yesterday. Um, so he's not on the spring football roster. I would assume that means because Will Hawthorne will be here in the summer. We didn't see them take a lot of linebackers in this group. Will Hawthorne being the only one. Um, because frankly, you just had so many guys coming back, and obviously then there's the roster size issue, there's the roster limit issue, and all that as well. But you have so many snaps and so many starts coming back in this group. There's just not room to take three linebackers. You pick one, which they did, Will Hawthorne, which is a very good linebacker. I don't know if he's got a chance to play this year. If you see Will Hawthorne on the football field as a linebacker in meaningful snaps, that is because he is an exceptionally good talent as a true freshman. They've shown willingness to play a true freshman at linebacker if that's just the best guy available. But you've got so much experience in here. We know that Matt Campbell prioritizes experience over raw talent. He'd rather take a slightly less talented guy that's got tons and tons and tons of starting experience than take a guy that's a little raw, hasn't played as much, but is a very clear natural talent for the position. So if you see Will Hawthorne on the football field as a linebacker in meaningful snaps, that is a very good sign for Iowa State because they're very deep at this position. Will Hawthorne is a very talented player. He's a 4-star linebacker, 90 overall rating on 247. He's got all the ability in the world. And I think he needs to put on a little bit of weight. He's registered here at 6'1.5", 215 pounds, which is obviously not very big for a linebacker. If you can get him up to 225, 230 by August, which I don't know if you can or not since he's not here for the spring. But if you can get him up to 230, 225, by the time they leave for Dublin, um, that's a guy that he can at least contribute on special teams for sure. But he'll be, that's at least the size where you could theoretically see him on a football field. So that's the freshman to watch out for is Will Hawthorne, but he's obviously not on campus yet. So all right, that is the linebacker group.